Hello, welcome back to Marathon Man, where I'm going through Doctor Who from the very beginning, and you join me as we finish Season 3. It feels strange to say it, but while I still find this period of the show far less consistent than the first two seasons, I'm not enjoying it any less, and I used to. In fact, this is the most I've ever enjoyed Season 3, and while I had been a bit reticent about hitting it based on previous experiences, the stories, on the whole, have entertained me far more than I ever remember them doing. Obviously, with the exception of the Celestial Toymaker and the gunfighters losing some of its charm. As the second season ended with a new type of story in the Time Meddler, so Season 3 draws to a close with another kind of story to try out in the War Machines. Here, we ring the changes by setting a story entirely on contemporary Earth for the very first time. Sure, we visited the first episode naturally, followed by Ian and Barbara's return, and then followed by Dodo jumping aboard at the end of the massacre, but this is no flying visit, as the Doctor arrives and remarks quite quickly on the prickling sensation under his skin, the same he felt when he's fought the Daleks before. Now, how right he is about their presence remains to be seen for now, end of Season 4, but they're not the antagonists he comes up against here. Instead, he has to fight an artificial intelligence that's modified some road sweepers. They are a truly naff machine, which makes their extended skirmish in the warehouse truly naff as well. Lots and lots of dry ice gets shot, so much so that I was half expecting a Bonnie Tyler impersonator to pop out of one, belting out Total Eclipse of the Heart. While for me the War Machines themselves are undoubtedly one of the Hartnell era's misfires, the War Machines as a story is one I've got a lot of fondness for. And despite the arduous warehouse battle, I don't feel like the story itself plods in any way. On account of setting itself on Earth in the present day, it has a familiar backdrop against which to fall back on. This means it can take its time with the story and, more crucially, with the new characters. We get to spend a little more time with Ben and Polly in their introductory story, and it works really well for them. First of all, they have a very nice and believable rapport, which means welcoming them aboard at the end is no hardship. Because more care is taken in their introductions to flesh them out a bit as characters, when they sneak aboard the TARDIS at the end of the story, it stirs up the memory of Ian and Barbara forcing their way in all that time ago, and pulling on this memory creates a lovely warm feeling that, for the first time in a long time, the adventure is about to begin all over again. Ben and Polly's prominence doesn't mean that the Doctor is as sidelined as he has been recently though. While he is confined to a couple of offices, the warehouse, and a brief visit to a nightclub, where, by the way, he manages to sit it out until closing time before trying to work out how to get home, plus there's a brief spell outside to trap a war machine, he still doesn't feel as removed as he did in the Celestial Toymaker and the Savages. That it's done more deftly here only goes to show how glaring it is in those other previous examples. Of course, there's the possibility that Hartnell's semi-relegation in other stories was out of charitable intentions instead of the hostility that I'd assumed. But whatever the reason for it, the fact that it's done so deftly in the War Machines goes to show that it could have been done better elsewhere without, in my opinion, almost humiliating the man. He even gets one of his very best hero moments, standing his ground amidst retreating soldiers as he faces down a war machine. And while this might be one of my very favourite Hartnell moments, there's actually quite a lot peppered throughout this story. Hartnell, as ever, is on form. I've always been fond of his Doctor, and marathoning the show from the beginning only ever highlights just how brilliant he actually was. When he shows up at the Inferno, his delivery of fab gear is absolutely wonderful.
Dig your fab gear!
Fab gear.
Even better is when he gets into the wrestling ring to psych out the Ultimate Warrior machine.
In the red corner, the oncoming storm, the Gallifreyan Goliath. It's the Doctor.
Just perfect. And yet, even though the story juggles the new arrivals with the Doctor very adeptly, Once again, the programme cannot help but shortchange sweet little Dodo. Again, she's shown to be quite a fun presence when she laughs to herself about a policeman mistakenly entering the TARDIS, but then as soon as we meet Polly, Dodo goes and gets hypnotised, tries to ensnare the Doctor before being sent to sleep and bundled off to the countryside. Oh well, you know, a couple of days rest in the country would be good for her before she starts to resume her... What's that? Oh, decided to stay, has she? Decided that off screen? Well, can't say I blame her. Why would you want to stay in a show that's routinely treated you like a cipher and can't even be bothered to write you out properly? Goodbye, Dodo. You did deserve better from the very start right up until the very end. So, what of the plot? Well, it's a little bit lightweight, but like I say, because it spends a good amount of time setting up the new companions, it doesn't feel like it drags. Votan is an intriguing idea for a villain as well, particularly if you consider how the viewers will have perceived fledgling computers at the time. And the idea, that purely clinical way of thinking, is terrifying in its implications when you realise that it cannot be reasoned with. Watching it today, with the current implications and subsequent debate about AI, I mean, replace Votan for the Entity and it's not a million miles away from Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. It affords it more relevance than on previous viewings, and so it did land with me more than usual, but that doesn't, it still throws up a lot of questions in the story itself. How Votan can hypnotise human beings isn't explained, and it feels important, but it would mean perhaps compromising on what the story wanted to say. Okay, an alien intelligence may have latched onto Votan's data and machinery, which is my preferred explanation given that a man inventing it in 1966 doesn't really wash with me. But the story wants to convey a machine that becomes self-aware, self-sufficient and capable of overthrowing humanity. This is not an alien story, this is a story about man-made technology, and in that regard it works less well for me. But it's not particularly a stumbling block that gets in the way of me enjoying the story, more a creeping question that gently gnaws at me while I'm watching it. So while the actual plot may feel a little bit flimsy, I can't consider it an overall failure given how well it achieves what it sets out to do. Yeah, okay, so the production values of the war machines themselves might not have aged very well, but setting Doctor Who in the here and now is something that will happen more and more, and so this being as a template for that, a kind of like proto-unit story if you like, the War Machines is actually fairly solid. Once again, even at the end of its third year, Doctor Who is still proving that it can try out new things, and I also think that Ben and Polly happen to be a breath of fresh air, which is lucky considering the gaping void that Stephen has left behind. By plonking the Doctor down in the contemporary era for the first time, it won't seem as jarring when it happens to his successors. Here are the sprouting seeds of the Doctor's relationship with Unit, his exile on Earth, and his ultimate affinity with the planet. He does waltz fairly easily into the establishment, and this ease of passage into the elite as a gentleman of refinement is seen by some as foreshadowing to his third incarnation's propensity for a sort of big C conservatism, yet it's all subterfuge, here as well as with Pertwee. A discussion from when we reach the third Doctor's era, I suppose, but I might as well mention it now. I don't think that the third Doctor is a big C conservative, nor do I think his first incarnation is. He's rather quick to snap at Sir Charles about his partial responsibility in the whole affair, and once he's defeated Votan and the War Machines, he cannot get out of there fast enough. He doesn't even say goodbye, he just leaves them mid-sentence and goes out the door to his TARDIS. But I do like how he could have spent the time while Susan was at school to sort of like ingratiate himself with these certain scientific institutions and certain higher-ups in the establishment, so it's easier for him to do it when he returns here. Obviously that's irrelevant, the story needs him to get in so he gets in, it doesn't matter, but I just like to explain it that way to myself. So no, I can't be too harsh on the War Games. It may have a wafer-thin story and it may pay off half a season's worth of mishandling of what could have been a really decent companion by showing her what is probably the most ultimate diss, but there is a lot of charm here. Now, some of that does come from it being the first story of its kind in Doctor Who, but make no mistake, most of that charm comes from Hartnell and his two new companions. I think this might be the first time in the show where I felt like they are definitely companions before they even jump aboard. Having embroiled themselves as much as they did in the caper with Votan, and having been pretty well drawn in their introductions anyway, they've earned their place, which may be why I don't feel like they've stowed away, even though they have. Season 3 comes to a close with a story that actually feels quite important, and knowing what's to come makes me sad, especially as, given the evidence from his performance here, Hartnell is still finding ways to delight as the Doctor and, crucially, showing no signs of slowing down. 126 episodes in now, and I absolutely do not want him to go.
Temper.
She says she's feeling much better and she'd like to stay here in London, and she sent you her love.
Oh, f*** off. As ever, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this lock-in at the Inferno, then you know how YouTube works. Please give it a like and share it around. I would be super immeasurably grateful. Is it a fresh injection of something new into Doctor Who, or is it a by-the-numbers stale old story Avengers ripoff? Was Dodo done dirty again? And are Ben and Polly exactly what we need right now? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you back here soon for another recap, this time of Season 3. And I've probably got a lot to say about that, given how much my opinions have changed this time round. So, if you don't want to miss that, hit the subscribe button, clang the cloister bell, and I'll see you soon.